Hello, Device, and welcome to this interview. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me.
We had a little small talk before we started this interview where you mentioned your health, and it's no secret that you've been having some serious health issues in the past. I just want to ask you, how are you actually doing?
I think it's going pretty good. Ending in 2017, which is way back now, it was a big struggle for me figuring out how to live a healthy lifestyle while also doing this extreme high pressure environment. But now just having figured out stuff like intermittent fasting and how to actually recover and switch off, I think is the most important thing for guys that are doing our job. Like, it's so easy to get back home after practicing and just turn on the PC and start practicing individually. And I think that sometimes it's counterproductive. And something I learned throughout the years is that being more effective and using your time better. For instance, also with the switch here to NIP, which allows me to use a lot of hours I was using for traveling and such to actually train and being closer to where I can actually switch off as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a lot of stress involved with the type of job you have and with all the traveling. I just want to know, how satisfied are you with the stress levels now? And is there anything you'd like to change?
I'm pretty satisfied. I think it's so hard with the COVID situation to actually know. But for me, being torn out of the environment we were in before COVID, and then having time to reflect on stuff and processes I wanted to work with individually, was something I learned a lot from in this period. So I think that I'm obviously not that stressed. I mean, the fatigue comes from traveling and comes from, competing, but also competing in arenas and such, which is something we are not doing currently. But yeah, I definitely have a little worry that when we get back to it again, that we will see the same trend we saw with a lot of players that get very stressed by the situation, right? But yeah, it's kind of up to the organizations to create a dynamic environment where you can actually switch off and relax and recover.
That's so good to hear. So, I mean, COVID has had its silver linings for you, at least.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've been considered to be one of the greatest talents in Counter-Strike, and you are also a very young talent. You are now 25 years old, and if I may say so, one of the more older and experienced players. How do you feel about that role and now being like a role model for younger, aspiring talents?
It's special. It's something I don't speak that much about, but it's definitely the truth that I'm the oldest one in the team and the most experienced one as well. And I think from me personally, one thing I always like to do also back in Astralis is just like kind of leading by example, by having good habits and taking care of myself and prioritizing my teammates and always setting my teammates before myself, which is something I still continue to do. I think now being with a team where there are a lot of inexperienced players, it's actually funny to see how it affects more than when you're playing with people that were part of the journey as well. But yeah, it's new to me. I don't feel that old yet, even though I'm turning 26 real soon. But yeah, I mean, in Counter Strike, I'm starting to reach at least the peak age and stuff like that, where it can only go one way from the next few years, right? That's at least what they're saying, and I just want to keep pushing that limit.
Is that something that worries you?
Nah, not really. Age is in esports is so weird. I think it's more with the motivation and the spark of wanting to compete, because as soon as you lose the will to set everything in front of, like, in back of CS, I would say that you kind of lose that competitive edge that you have to keep getting the small percentages to get better.
Yeah, so you have many good years ahead of you, I hope. Speaking more about these talents and age and things, I feel like every time you watch a tournament now, there's always like a young, new talent breaking through. How do you view this talent base in competitive Counter-Strike, all these young guns?
Yeah, that's a pretty good observation. I had a good talk yesterday with a sparring athlete that came back from the Olympics, and I talked about experience in traditional sports compared to esports and why we are seeing talents come and go and having such a short lifespan, which is something I didn't have in my career. Like, as you said, I was considered a talent when I was 13 years old, and yeah, that's I'm double the age of that now, right? But I think that what we're seeing is that people measure each other and themselves and judge themselves too much on statistics rather than results and team dynamics, which is something that doesn't translate that well into results and learning to being a good teammate. And that's why we see so many of these players come up, because the individual skill is obviously very high, and I don't think talent is necessarily what makes a good player. So that's at least how I see it, and I think that what we've seen with us in Astralis, a little bit what we're doing here at Ninjas and also with Gambit, you're seeing that teams that have been on a journey and they play to win as a team have longevity and success together, which is more enjoyable than just winning a tournament and dropping off and just picking up new players when you stop winning. And that's why I think that talents are so wanted in CS, but I don't necessarily think it's the future. But with the academy leagues and stuff like this happening, you can shape them into becoming the players you want for the future, while also learning to grow into that journey and being good teammates.
So you mentioned being a good teammate. Of course, it's important. But is there any other good advice for the young players out there, except for just playing a lot and grinding a lot?
Yeah, I think that number one is what I'm hinting at, and at being a good teammate is not being selfish. I think setting your teammates in front of yourself and actually trying to have that empathy, understanding what's going on and how can I make my team play better and how can they make me play better, rather than thinking about being in good situations that might create bad situations for your team, which is something that CS is so good at having that dynamic where the star players shine so hard and the other players struggle so much, which in the end is just a end product of how the team dynamic is working, right? And I think that is the most important thing to learn. And I think that all top players learn this at one point. So it's just about trying to prioritize learning that early is going to be a good way to push yourself and challenge yourself as well.
Thank you. That's really good advice. I'll remember that when I start my professional Counter-Strike career.
Yeah, sure.
So when you first joined NIP, you mentioned something in a vlog about the Ninjas being 5 steps ahead. Now you've been with Ninjas in Pyjamas for a few months, and I just want to know from your experience, how many steps ahead are the Ninjas actually?
Oh yeah, sure. I think that it was taken out of context so much, but it's so funny. No matter what you say now, it's just like a headline. But I mean, like, how many steps ahead are we? I don't know how the process is going at Astralis. I don't talk to them that much about business and in general competing, but more personal stuff. But yeah, I would say like the whole way of pushing how to practice, probably how to set everything into routines, especially online, which was something we were not good at in Astralis. We were a few steps ahead when I joined NIP, and I was really surprised by the setup of how they want to practice and review and constantly push each other. Whereas we in Astralis didn't do reviews that much, and we weren't good enough at practicing, I would say, in the way we practice here, without going too much into detail and sharing all the secrets, right? But being a few steps ahead or not, I'm not sure. I think Astralis are not that happy where they are, and we are still not that happy where we are. We want to win. Same as Astralis, right? And that's what we are competing for. No comments about how many steps we are ahead, because I don't really know.
Yeah, okay, I understand how things can be taken a little bit out of context sometimes. But then I have another question for you that might also be a little edgy. I mean, a lot of people, they thought it was controversial how you said that when you're with Astralis, you felt like oftentimes you were just getting lucky. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
I think it's just a part of competing, being lucky. Honestly, you see it in all sports. You can train the most, you can do the most, but ultimately winning on the day is a little bit about luck, especially with Counter-Strike. Of course, you're not lucky over a consistent amount of period of time, right? So in that way, it's just that creating the era we got Magisk and everything, and how everything kind of just spiraled into it. It was a little bit coincidence, a little bit hard work, and that's what I mean with luck. Luck is gotta be a factor, right? When you think of all this stuff, even though my career in the beginning was very unlucky with some of the other guys in Astralis, where we would look at some of the games, right? We just lost on milliseconds and stuff like that, which is just the parameters of the game. So that's what I mean with, if we are lucky, also here in NIP, if we were a little bit more lucky or a little bit more cohesive in some situations, and we just put the work in, I think that you can get a good result. But it also means that when you lose to a team, it doesn't necessarily mean you have had a bad day or you're playing bad or you're on the wrong journey, but just that the team has been better on the day.
Staying in the realm of lucky and being lucky and getting lucky, Astralis, they just picked up Lucky for their roster to fill in your previous position. How do you feel about that swap, and what do you think about Lucky's performance so far?
Team-wise, I don't think they're that happy with the Pro League group stage. I know they're not happy. Lucky is good. I didn't watch that much of him before when he was in Tricked, but I knew he was a talent that a lot of teams looked at. And looking at him in the group stage, I think he's very secure, a little bit like me, I would say. And I think that's good. Very good for the team in general to have a AWPer plays that role. He has to develop some stuff, which I don't know how good he is at, which is like communication and setting up your teammates and stuff, which is, I don't know how good he is, right? But that's some of the things when you are young, you don't really prioritize that much. But other than that, I think he's a great pickup. I think we have a lot of good AWPers in Denmark, and you have Farley, you have Acor, you have Lucky and Kadian as well, right? Which is obviously in my age group, but some of the other guys are a little bit younger. So yeah, I think that there was a lot of guys to pick from, and he was the one they picked. So he must be a very special talent.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lucky is quite young, and I know we talked a little bit about this, but I want to talk more about the dynamic in NIP now for you, being one of the older players, playing with a lot of younger players. How has this changed the dynamic in the team for you, being with all these young guns?
I mean, in some way, I can still be the most immature guy. So I think that my mental age sometimes, if not that, I'm not that old. But yeah, I think that with the experiences and with how I want to make the guys feel, being in the presence of me as a teammate, and also teaching them how I want them a little bit, at least for my own sake, how I view how a good teammate is, and creating that trust that is so very important in CS, that you can sacrifice for each other, is a fun dynamic to work with, and not something I was ever a big part of in Astralis, whereas I would more just fill my role, and you would have Glaive and Sonic actually be the guys that were doing a lot of that, right? So it's a very exciting dynamic for me, and it's something that made me grow a lot so quickly, learning to pick up small hints and to pick up some of the players that have had rough games and are not used to coming back for that and stuff like that, which is also just like pushing them to not make the same mistake twice, and asking for them to push me for that, which is very hard for them, obviously, because there is some level of respect with the name, which is something I don't necessarily like, but it's there, right? So trying to make myself vulnerable to make sure that they also know it's okay to be vulnerable and we can grow together.
Yeah, okay, it sounds like you really found the place to grow and develop yourself, and I'm really happy for you.
Thank you so much.
So you mentioned Sonic, and I want to talk more about these dynamics. Now you have a Threat as a coach, and I feel like when we see him on stage, he seems very passionate and energetic behind you guys. But can you explain a little bit more about how he is as a coach, actually, and also maybe how he compares to working with Sonic as you did before?
I think they're very much alike in the in-game stuff. I think they're very smart, both of them. They want to not just look at other teams, but develop their own game style, which is something they both have done previously. So in that way, I think they are very similar. I would say Sonic is maybe more, he's more of a screamer, if you can say like that. He's like all over the place and screaming and emotionally invested in a way, whereas Bjorn is a little bit more calm and collected, I would say. So that's probably the difference between those two. What is the strength and weaknesses of both? I don't necessarily know that yet. I think that I'm just very excited to work with Bjorn, and I'm so humbled also having worked with Sonic. He knows that. I speak to him a lot, and he is definitely the guy that made me into the person and the player I am today. So a lot of can-do to him. And yeah, I think that just working with two different coaches, you learn to respect different ways of also trying to develop the how to play the game.
Yeah, because obviously you've been working with Sonic for like a very long time.
Yeah.
But talking more about these dynamics and the new team, you now have a new IGL as well. Obviously, it is Hampus, whereas previously you worked with Glaive for a long time as well. How does those two compare in their way of being in-game leaders, and what do you feel about it?
I think he's good. I think he's a little bit more a risk taker. I think he likes to live life on the edge a little bit, Hampus, and he's not afraid of of dying in the game and stuff like that. So it's definitely the two different ways of kind of IGLing, but he's very good, and he's very, very good at reading the map, whereas Clay was more good at reading the opponent. I think that's the two differences. But the funny part is that the first thing that Glaive said when I told him I was leaving, he said that if you're going to NIP, make sure they keep hampus. That's the first thing he said. So I think he admires him a little bit, and hampus definitely admires Glaive as well. So I think they have a lot of respect for each other, and even though they have maybe two different styles on calling, I think that they both like to be leaders, and he's definitely a good leader as well. Same goes for Glaive.
Thank you. That was also some great insight on Glaive's parting words with you. That's really good to hear. Previously, you've also been known to be a very early adapter to new maps coming into the map pool, for instance, with Astralis on Vertigo. I know that you've adapted Ancient, but can you tell me how you feel about Ancient as an addition to the current active map pool?
I think it's a good map, honestly. I think it's one of the better maps that were added. It's not fully discovered yet, but it's a map we play a lot in NIP, and we pick it against a lot of teams in Cologne, and we're practicing it a lot. So how do I feel? I miss Train. I think that there are some other maps that are not so good. Dust 2, for instance, I don't really, even though it's a good map for me personally, I don't really think it's a good map in general for competitive Counter-Strike. But I won't complain about Ancient. I think that we just have touched like the surface on how good teams can be on it, because there must be some changes at one point. That's how it always is. So I'm just waiting for the next batch of changes, and I will see how to go from there.
Okay, thank you. And you also mentioned that NIP has actually been playing Ancient quite a bit already. I just want to know, has that also been partially your decision as a type of person who is generally this early adapter to new maps?
I think honestly, it's on Björn, Threat the coach. He is also a big fan of theory crafting and just doing a lot of new stuff, and thinks that he believes that he is one of the best at doing that. So then when we have new maps, we're trying to abuse that skill of him. And he's doing a good job, and he's thinking out of the box, whereas I also like doing it, but I think that's more in specific for my role rather than as the team and how the teams play. So yeah, I'm just trying to make some moves and trying to get people to copy me, which is the ultimate respect you get in CS.
Thank you so much, dev1ce. And for the last and most important question of the day, I just want to ask you, would you consider cereal to be a soup? Why or why not?
Cereal to be a soup. Oh, I haven't eaten cereal for many years. Soup, that depends on how. No, but there's crazy people that actually put the cereal in first and then the milk after. Or is it the other way around? It's the milk in first and the cereal after. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so how do you do it? Is it cereal first or milk first?
I would say cereal first. Otherwise, you don't know how. And I don't use that much milk because I want it to be dry. I remember that, but it's been a few years. Okay, we had this thing in Denmark called Frosties, which I ate when I was a kid a lot. It was so good.
Oh yeah, I remember those. It's just plain sugar. And maybe not the most ideal food for an athlete.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I quit. Now I just eat oatmeal all the time.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time and do this interview with me today, dev1ce. It has been a pleasure, and I wish you all of the best on your journey with NIP. I'm very excited to keep an eye out for that.
Thank you so much, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.